During the forum and the day before the forum, we of course see the final result, but behind it all there is always a lot of painstaking work by the Media Forum team. There are participants who have come to our country on different business but participate in the forum for the first time. There are also those who have never been to Kazakhstan and thus have never attended the forum either. The fact that they come brings us a lot of joy and we consider it to be our yet another small achievement. It is interesting how the room is going to look on the screen. We have a great organizing committee with a lot of experience. They are sharp in their work and do not bother me with trivial issues. In other words, I'm absolutely sure and know that everything is going to be fine.
In the center of Eurasia, there stands Astana, a young capital of the world, the symbol of connection between the East and the West with the Media Forum as its dialogue platform. The most burning topics, the most interesting and credible speakers, the most brisk and hot debates. It has been like this for already 12 years. Major events of the past year, no insincerity and no censorship. Here the priorities have been set a long time ago, the main one being the opportunity for an honest and open dialogue. Tell us about the first Media Forum.
It was like falling in love for the first time. The excitement, the rush of the moment, the sleepless nights. Before the first Media Forum, approximately 8 months prior, I went to see all speakers myself. I traveled quite a lot. I felt it was important and necessary to talk to every potential participant whom we wanted to see at the forum personally, to invite them in such a manner so as to have the opportunity for an informal conversation, the opportunity to talk to them in private and clear whatever concerns they might have had. The aura of the president's daughter, you know, has a lot of advantages and likewise disadvantages. As a rule, if a person lives far away and doesn't have all the information, the disadvantages prevail. And when someone sees the name of Nazarbayev, the first reaction is, no, I'm not going to go. In order to avoid that, I did all this work myself while preparing for the first forum, and for the second, and for the third.
В Астане сегодня открылся 12-й Евразийский медиафорум. Участники 12-го Евразийского медиафорума.
Более 500 делегатов и спикеров собрались в сердце Евразии.
Первый день 12-го по счету съезда известных журналистов и политиков.
The press center on the eve of the forum. The time for the final preparations. The internet and the computers are on. Here on the screen, we will have the real-time broadcasting of everything going on just 10 meters away in the main hall of the Palace of Independence. Journalists from more than 20 countries will cover the Media Forum. The forum's agenda is quite impressive, but this year the organizers surprised the participants not only with a spectrum of issues for discussion, but also with the method of their presentation.
I think it's fantastic. It looks really, really good, and it all seems to be working perfectly.
This is Tim Senhaus, the efficiency director, sharing his impressions after the session about the efficiency of the visual presentation. It is very hard to impress people like him, but the Media Forum is not the case. This is the first time when such screen is going to be used in Kazakhstan. The technology here is similar to IMAX and allows to get the effect similar to 3D. The screen is a single piece of material 35 meters wide. It is used to broadcast a lot of various video materials directly from the main forum room for our delegates.
This is the 21st century and everybody is sitting and talking without the need to stand up and sit down again and again. In other words, I very much like the layout of the room.
Perhaps the main thing making this year's Media Forum different from previous ones is the speakers. The speakers' mix has changed by more than 70%, or even almost 80%. They're all highly qualified experts representing different countries and different opinions. Riz Khan is among the remaining 20% and is considered a veteran, a well-known TV host and journalist who has served the forum's moderator for many years. He has come to Kazakhstan in 2003. He was pleased to receive the invitation and accepted it without any misgivings.
Ironically, it was at that event that really things started to move with the idea of an international Al Jazeera channel. And I had been approached to help launch this channel for Al Jazeera, English language.
Vladimir Posner is among the new 80% and may be called a newcomer. We shouldn't be mistaken about what such meetings can and cannot do. They are not meant to resolve whatever issues. What they can do, and this of course depends on the composition of the participants, is to plant thoughts in people's heads. These thoughts may have an effect later. So in my opinion, having such a forum is a great idea. Once again, this was the first time for me, and I don't know whether there will be a second one, but I do not regret coming here. The first session in which he took part set the overall tone of the event. The New World Order. Who's actually in power? How has the world changed? And is all new just well forgotten old?
Today, there's again talk of a Cold War. And I would say, be careful with terminology. The Cold War was about ideology and about a struggle for the minds of the world. Today, there's a serious tension, a growing tension, between the former Cold War opponents, the United States of America and the Russian Federation. But it's not ideology. It's a completely different issue.
Although there were a lot of mutual accusations, it didn't prevent American and Russian representatives to speak from the same podium.
I don't think we are the sole superpower. I think that there is no hegemonic power on the planet. I think that the period of massive American advantage has been dramatically shortened.
After the disintegration of the Soviet Union, this world order was actually followed by numerous problems in Yugoslavia, Iraq, Syria. Should it be the world order which is based on the disorder or dominance of one of the powers which considers itself to be the winner?
The audience entered the discussion almost immediately. The issue of double standards is quite a sensitive one. The Iranian nuclear program has been approved and the necessary agreements have been reached, but issues keep coming up and the once friendly countries keep on blaming each other.
Why don't you sign the agreement on non-proliferation of nuclear weapons, and why do you believe that you have the right to have nuclear weapons whereas other countries don't have such rights?
Is it Mr. Safarov who asked? Yes. So I want to tell the audience that Mr. Safarov is the head of a body deployed, I believe, in Moscow, who is responsible for encouraging the relationship and probably commercial relationship, otherwise an understanding between Russia, Iran and the world. So the
tension in the room stayed there during the break. The debating parties kept their backs to each other until the next session, which was entirely devoted to the nuclear program. And although the organizers tried their best to smooth out sharp edges, our aim is to make the forum a platform for dialogue and not conflict. The tone remained tense the whole hour and a half of discussion, although this time Ehud Barak was in the audience while his opponent took one of the speaker's chairs. The US representative was also there and was taking the largest share of claims.
I believe that the Americans so much overwhelmed with this policy of sanctions that this policy very often is contradicting their own interests. And it becomes the source of instability in many countries.
Sanctions against Iran were initiated by Western countries in the 80s of the last century to try to force the Islamic Republic to stop its nuclear program, which, according to the US and the EU, was aimed at developing nuclear weapons.
So it's a little hard to say to us, gee, this was really aggressive, because you took sanctions when you're trying to communicate with a country that didn't want to negotiate. And I think that's a fact. We now are at a point where this may all work out, but I don't think we should kid ourselves.
And then it was Geneva, November 2013. Russia, the US, China, the Great Britain, France and Germany at the negotiations table. The 6 international intermediaries and the official Tehran came to the historical agreement. Iran would downsize its nuclear program, provide access to it for more detailed inspection by the international experts, and the enslaving economic sanctions against the country would be loosened.
I will say, from an American perspective, the frequency with which Iranian officials basically undercut the deal rhetorically doesn't help. I mean, to have somebody say, you know, well, we're never going to agree not to build a nuclear weapon, which at least 2 officials have said since the deal was cut, increases our suspicions and makes us more inclined to put pressure on. But for the moment, I would say that it's a wait and see and hope that it actually works kind of position.
The sanctions which were putting was a let's say, a step to more confrontation in the future. So I don't accept this argument that when you put sanctions, you are really accepting the, let's say, the better solution.
Newt Gingrich did not hear all the feedback, as he didn't want to miss his plane. Before leaving, he wished all the participants peace and a peaceful dialogue, which enraged the rest of the speakers even more.
I'm really very sorry that Mr. Gingrich is leaving this meeting room, because if he heard my words, maybe on his way he would have been thinking about these words and would have influenced his colleagues in the Congress and in the USA. The point is that the Iranian nuclear program was actually created nowhere.
We have a long history of dealing with Iranians. And if there's one thing I'll tell you, they're very smart people. They're not stupid. They're not suicidal. So if you think that the Iranians are raring to press the nuclear button, that would be suicidal. I don't think they're that.
One speaker was also missing during the session on the Middle Eastern conundrum, the conflict in Syria. He had arrived and was present in the room, but refused to sit down in the experts' lineup.
And let me introduce one other member of our panel who, again, didn't want to join us on the podium for his own reasons. Maybe he will be able to explain them.
The opinions of the participants were as contradicting as the situation in the region itself. The organizers could not escape the discussion, although it has been on the media forum's agenda for several years, as the headlines are always different.
We talked more or less about the same things last year. We talked, we discussed, we argued, but it's all still there. But had the situation in the past year in this important area of the world become more relaxed?
No, really.
Химической атаке подвергся пригород Дамаска. To visit the site of a suspected chemical weapons attack. Women and children found dead under suspicious circumstances in Syria.
This news literally stirred up the international community. More than half a year has passed since the accident, but there is still no exact information about the victims, on what it really was and who was really behind it.
For the first time in the history, criminal is found, he gives up his chemical weapons, and he still stays a ruler. That's the first in the world history. Basil, you know that the question of chemical weapons and attacks in Damascus, it's still an open question. It's not clear who's behind that.
In the light of the latest events, the Syrian representative referred to his country as a soccer ball played by the superpowers. Maxim Shevchenko compared it to the chessboard.
By simply dividing it, by putting people in reservation. And while Middle East is reservations of the greater West, there will be a war, and there will be always hatred, and someone will always play their dirty games on that chessboard.
I think that you are over-exaggerating the role of grand conspiracies. I don't believe that the Middle East is a place where the big powers, namely American colonial powers, Russia, whoever, play like chess. And it's not money and political play. It's genuine, especially in the last decade. What we see is genuine, coming out of the deep currents of history within the Middle East.
The questions were coming from the audience literally non-stop, about the history of the conflict, about Gaddafi and Hussein, about the Kurds genocide and the role of Turkey in the conflict.
We have over 1 million refugees in Turkey, and I believe that most of them will never turn back. They are going to live in Turkey, learn Turkish, study, they are going to marry there. You know, of the migration histories, it follows so. Because Syria is not a state that we can make again a takeoff. They don't have enough energy, they have sanctions, they have a big conflicts, now the marginal groups are there and so on.
Это искусственно созданный конфликт.
That takes a lot of bravery. And Syria is an artificially created conflict. Of course, the Assad regime needed modernizing, and Bashar al-Assad tried to do that modernizing using the World Bank norms. Believe you me, these consultations took place. I was witness to them, and once again we see the consultation with the World Bank lead to population going poor and civil war.
Maxim Shevchenko's presentation on the Ukraine, although against the rules of the forum, was not less emotional. The session on the Ukraine was very intense. It really was more than intense. Even I, being the moderator, got somewhat hot under the collar and probably stepped over the line. Moderators should be cool and indifferent, but frankly speaking, it is really difficult to keep calm when my people and my country are being torn to pieces. Especially taking account of the fact that this is happening this very minute. The issue was obviously the most discussed. The events in the Ukraine are perceived by the global community as nothing but lawlessness. Dozens killed and hundreds injured, thousands of ruined lives. The Ukrainian speakers failed to answer the question as to who had allowed the situation to deteriorate to such an extent.
It's convenient to discuss Ukraine without presence of Ukraine. Thank you very much, Alexeyev, not coming due to reasons known. Irina Gerashchenko didn't come either. And Sergei Kunitsyn and the editor-in-chief of the Ukrainskaya Pravda didn't come. She says she's not sure for her safety in territory of Kazakhstan. About 3 or 4 more Ukrainian politicians did not come. Please don't blame us, blame them.
The dialogue, nonetheless, took place, intense, emotional and perhaps subjective.
It was not a hidden hand from outside that did this. It wasn't about geopolitics. Ukrainians were attracted to the European association model because of the norms that it expected the Ukrainian government to comply with on issues of governance, not because they wanted to be part of Europe. Ukraine isn't going to be a member of the EU. That's not going to happen. It's not going to be a member of NATO. That's not going to happen.
The debate on who's to blame and what to do continued in the Palace of Independence for a long time. At times, it all resembled a conversation between the blind and the deaf. Despite the hot discussion, everybody agreed to differ, summarizing in a very similar manner that time will show. A Georgian politician, Mr. Pirveli, is also waiting. His country is expected to sign the agreement on association with the EU this coming June, and nobody knows what it will bring about.
That associated treaty is something not to sign. I raised this question, I learned that in Georgia not a single politician had read it. Not a Georgian politician had read that agreement, but everybody wants it. It wasn't translated into Georgian.
I cannot and do not wish to interfere in the Ukrainian internal politics. As a Georgian politician, I simply observe, and my only desire in this regard is that the political events currently taking place there, if they get somehow reflected in Georgia, would take a softer form.
Agreements, contracts, mistakes and ways of avoiding them, advantages and disadvantages of integration, both European and Eurasian, became the center of attention during the next session.
Speaking normally of advantages of Euro integration, Eurosceptics appealed to the practice of Bulgaria and Romania, but don't go too far. 3 Baltic countries have also survived this tragedy. So they practically have become Europeans they're basically starting from scratch, build their economy, for their products are not any good. They're simply not allowed into Europe, you know that quite well. So they need to reformat their economy, and most importantly, these European investors are not rushing into those countries, mostly European investors not.
The experts highlighted the benefits, more numerous than drawbacks, but this is only in the long term.
Yet see any positive results, and I would like to really separate things such as, for example, the integration ideology, which has a lot of aspects such as, for example, modernization or reaching out the markets of 170 million population strong, etc., etc. But when we are talking about practical issues, that's where we are facing a lot of problems. For the last 3 years during the existence of our customs union, I can tell you that it's a kind of one-way traffic.
And if there is a lack of understanding between countries, what about the common citizens, for whom the very term represents quite an elusive concept?
The common citizens of Armenia, when they were asked last year the question during the sociological survey, who would you like to be integrated with? Roughly about 82% said we would like to be integrated with the Russian Federation.
This was probably the only session where the speakers agreed. It is necessary to carry out awareness-raising activities among the population because miscomprehension or the lack thereof on their part may at best result in economic crash.
I understand that not so many people understand what we are talking about, because everybody is quoting numbers, people mention some projects, but if you ask them how the decision was taken, why and when, no one will be able to entertain these questions.
Before the forum, we conducted a survey to see what Kazakhstan is associated with. 7 delegates mentioned the name of Nazarbayev. 4, the oil reserves, 6, ambitious development of Astana, and another 6, also Astana, but this time the cycling team. Another 3 recollected the triumphal performance of our Olympic team in London. Nobody mentioned Borat. His name emerged only during the discussion and only in the sense of a tool of a country's PR.
Has Borat been good or bad for Kazakhstan? I want to ask.
Well, I don't think it's been bad for Kazakhstan at all. I think that Borat was quite useful in the sense that it introduced the name of the country to a large number of people who perhaps had never even heard of it before. Okay. And that means that Sacha Baron Cohen, the director of the Borat movie, has done the Kazakh people quite a favor.
Simon Enholt has been doing national branding for over 15 years. There were resounding victories as well as defeats. His approach is different for every country, but the country's approach regarding self-promotion is the same.
And out of those 53 countries that I've advised on these matters in the last 16 or 20 years, every single one of them has started with the same mistake. They think we're a fantastic country, but those ignorant people out there in the rest of the world don't understand it. So the way to help them understand how fantastic we are is by telling them how fantastic we are. Well, you know what? It really doesn't work because they really don't care.
Governments spend millions of dollars annually to promote their national brands. But there is no unified formula. It is more like an equation with 2 unknowns, which may be calculated only if the expected result is clearly set. In our case, it is the goal.
If you want a branding image campaign that is effective, you have to change what it is you're trying to communicate. Otherwise, everything else is, as they would say in the southern parts of the United States, putting lipstick on a pig.
We conduct a lot of work, carry out a lot of work on this, and by the end of the day, our today's event, Eurasian Media Forum, is a kind of branding of our country as well. We have different events, such as, for example, Astana Economic Forum, during which we have an opportunity to present our country, to pass a message across that our country is ready for cooperation with anybody, that it is open and transparent. And the most important thing is that our partners will observe our laws, our principles, and will work and cooperate with us on an honest basis.
The technology of playing this game is dictated by the times.
May I have some pictures of that lady, please?
If it wasn't for the final outcome, these pictures could have served a good study case for the session on the national branding.
She was put under house arrest. Her Twitter account was hacked, and she's effectively doesn't have any internet, or I assume doesn't even have a computer at home.
The virtual life of Gulnara Karimova, the daughter of the president of Uzbekistan, is a real-life example. Stylish, young and beautiful. She got the whole country simply falling in love with her and attracted the attention of the virtual community.
So to create a sort of subculture in Uzbekistan. But the moment she decided to move to politics, that's when the trouble started. And one of the instruments she used to promote herself was Twitter.
So you're saying she should have just stuck to the glamour?
What she should have probably have done.
The internet is packed with similar pictures, life for show in all its manifestations. What's important is that you are in the picture. Selfie is the trend of the current season.
That the largest number of likes for the photographs that are related one way or another, related to your face or faces of your friends or loved ones. People follow trends because people are interested in people. When they follow you, they're interested in you.
If in addition you are a celebrity, it is a sure success. Take a look at the Twitter of Ms. Poklonskaya, the prosecutor of the Republic of the Crimea.
Natalia Poklonskaya from Crimea during 1 month actually blown up everything in Japan, and there are anime with Poklonskaya as the main character. Her pictures are collecting a lot of followers and a lot of pictures, and everybody knows that this account is a fake.
What do you think, dear panelists? Social media, evil or good? Fire, is that evil or good? You can use social media for hatred, incitement, or you can use them to raise money to treat a child with a disease.
How will the social situation change, and will the world order be restored? The organizers of the media forum will start receiving answers to these questions already tomorrow, as the preparations for the event commence long before its opening.
Such as the pass of our media forum, we have to prepare it for 1 year, and it passes very fast during 1 or 2 days to be able to come back again.
The forum keeps an eye on the latest developments.
See you again at the 13th Forum on the 23rd and 24th of April 2015.